I would like to tell you about Mark Squire has been a food advocate for many, many years. He's an activist. He has launched several projects, different campaigns, and he's one of the people behind all the ban on GMOs in Northern California in different counties. And also he was one of the most important parts of the campaign Prop 27 to label GMOs in California. He is one of he was the spark on the Non-GMO Project. That is a certification that many companies use to certify their Non-GMO products. And he has had good air, natural foods over 50 years in Fairfax, California, and Mill Valley. He's one of the most important advocates on sustainable food systems in California, and he's one of the main people in Soil Not All. He has been supporting, we have been working together for 10 years in organizing conferences. So, and he's going to be interviewing, well, he's going to introduce Jonathan Latham, who is an amazing activist, scientist, researcher. He has been writing a lot of articles on different stuff. But Mark, please, thank you so much for being here, for supporting us all these years. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us again. And now you have the stage.
Well, good afternoon, at least in California, to folks. And, you know, me and Jason here are really the only ones that are in the gray room, which is where the Soil Not Oil has always been. But we're very lonely here. We're in an upper room, kind of making the whole thing work. And it's been kind of fun. And we sure have had some great speakers, for sure. You know, the next talk was really conceived largely because there's this, you know, rapidly emerging topic that I think, you know, our community really needs to understand pretty quickly. And the GMO world has always been shifting rapidly. I first got to know Jonathan when he came to California for a GMO talk that we had. It was just after the federal government had preempted all of our states from doing GMO labeling, and the community was really, you know, one, furious, and two, not knowing where to go next. So that was the context in which I met Jonathan, and you know, he stayed with me, and I always remember I was brand new to farming at that point, and I always, you know, feel like I have high regard for a top-notch scientist that's willing to pick up a hoe and go out and weed with me when I needed it. So there's always that gratitude. And so Jonathan, you know, basically, I know Jonathan is running the Independent Science News, which is very, very, you know, he has very important articles always, thoroughly researched. And then I guess Jonathan's also writing a book called Myth of the Master Molecule, which we're all kind of anxious to actually get our hands on and hear about. Maybe we'll get a little bit of a story about that too. But I just wanted to, you know, follow through a little bit on the where we're at with GMO labeling. You know, after that happened with the federal legislation preempting states, the federal government went on to get USDA to write regulations for what labeling of GMOs would look like. And probably very predictably, they came out with this really ludicrous set of labeling guidelines. One, they didn't even have the nerve to call it GMOs. They've rather substituted this other word, bioengineered, thinking that it would present it better to the public, I think. You know, two, the labeling basically makes it so that any highly refined foods don't need to be labeled with GMO at all. And so that would include, you know, sugar, oils, any, you know, probably most of the GMOs on the market will never be labeled because they're they're not required under the new labeling thing. And then thirdly, they don't even require real disclosure on package for products. It's rather, they're allowing this QR code, this little symbol, to be on the package that somebody's supposed to use their smartphone and go look up the fact that it's actually a GMO, as though we will do that. So we have been working with the Center for Food Safety, who has always been a champion in the GMO world. 2 weeks ago now, I think we filed suit against USDA to basically require them to, if they're going to do labeling, do meaningful labeling. So that's, you know, I just wanted to present that little bit of sort of background for the community that is tracking that topic. And of course, the world of GMOs has rapidly shifted for us in the last, you know, 5 or 10 years, really. And now we're looking at genetically engineered foodstuffs that are made from genetically engineered yeasts and bacterial, GMO bacteria. And of course, you know, with the COVID thing and the Wuhan, China thing, it kind of just brought to light the fact that we actually have been genetically engineering viruses for a while. And, you know, obviously that concerned me. I immediately wanted to know what Jonathan's opinion was about that. And so we're going to kind of dive into that topic a little bit and learn, I think, a lot about it. So maybe I'll start with you, Jonathan. You know, what was your introduction to GMO viruses, and how did you become aware of them?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, thanks very much, Mark, and thanks very much, Miguel, and the folks at Soil Not Oil for this chance to come and talk with you. I hope we'll have a great conversation. So, you know, and all these issues that you've just raised, they're becoming more and more intertwined with each other. You know, as part of the story of why we started doing a little bit of research on the virus, when, you know, normally my focus is on food. You know, I really want the whole world to focus on their food supply and their food system. And, you know, and I see all these people who have, you know, kind of differences of opinion with the government, with corporations, and so on and so forth. But, you know, I often feel that their concerns are not very firmly grounded. And the food system and the food movement is the group that I see that is the most firmly grounded in reality, if you like. And so I like to focus on that. And so going off into studying this virus and how, whether it came from a lab in Wuhan, has been a big shift for me, even though I'm a virologist by training. And the simple answer to your question is that I got into it because I got sent some research papers. I planned not to, right? I was like, you know, you must keep your focus on the food system. Let's just focus on that. This is about other people. And I got sent some papers about the kind of research that was going on at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And, you know, when you think about the situation with this virus, you have an epicenter of an origin of the outbreak, and it's still the epicenter, which is basically within a mile or two of this lab that I knew nothing about. But when I've been sent these papers, I realized that this is a lab that is doing research on exactly the kind of problematic viruses that has led to the COVID-19 epidemic. So I immediately thought, you know, there has to be a connection between this outbreak and the lab. You know, maybe it was engineered, maybe it wasn't engineered, but there has to be some kind of connection between the two. And when I realized that, I thought, okay, I have to drop the book, I have to drop the food work that we're doing and try to look into this. And there's been a whole kind of like little group of people on the internet, especially on Twitter, who've been doing all this really interesting research into the origins of the virus and the sequences that have been released onto the internet and what happened at the Wuhan Institute of Virology before and after the outbreak. And we've basically fed off of that research to come up with some ideas about where this virus came from that are, to me, are very promising, but totally relevant to our GMO, all of our GMO discussions, because, you know, if this is an engineered virus and if it's being produced, you know, as a recombinant virus or being made with recombinant DNA technology, then this speaks really loudly to the fact that we often do not know what we're doing when we do these experiments, companies and institutes and military people with their biowarfare ideas equally. So this was the kind of big picture thinking that I had.
But Jonathan, so it's not just, you know, I mean, it's definitely not China, right? I mean, isn't it so that, you know, the United States has been very involved. In fact, you know, even in the world of GMO bacteria and yeast for food production, I was always shocked when some of the funders for it proved to be DARPA, which is our Defense Department, and which is quite shocking to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hope we will go into this, and maybe now is the right moment. But basically, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which, you know, which in our understanding, the thesis that we put online, which we call the Mojang minus passaging theory of where the virus came from, basically implicates a lab that was being funded by the U.S. Right, the National Institutes of Health in the U.S. is funding the lab in China to do this research, which is collecting exotic and scary viruses from bats and bringing them back to Wuhan. And so there is this whole international network, and it includes DARPA, it includes the Gates Foundation, it includes you know, people making vaccines, people doing all kinds of interesting work on diagnostics of viruses. All these groups and the military, right? DARPA is part of the military. These groups are all kind of interconnected with each other, doing this kind of these radical forms of engineering that are, you know, that are basically the consequence has been the release of this virus. And there are some details in there that we don't fully know, but basically the project, the bigger project of all these people, the Gates Foundation, and all the companies that are associated with them, is really the destruction of the public health model that we have, right? It's really an interesting story because this is not about China. China, in many ways, is going to be a victim of all this, but it's being funded by this huge network, and the fundamental deep purpose of this network is basically to replace traditional public health with all these silver bullet methods of preventing diseases, right? Vaccines and diagnostics and special precautions for each new virus that comes along, whether it's from a factory farm or whether it's from a lab or whether it's from some kind of zoonotic outbreak. They have a plan that will basically involve the public spending a lot of public money being spent and a lot of money being made in the private sector to supply that silver bullet to them. So they have this whole model that's really complicated, yeah.
So what is? I'm just curious, like what's in their mind? Like why? You know, it's almost like why the hell would you want to genetically engineer a virus and take that danger? What is their motive there, and what is what are they actually modifying the viruses to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think you need to kind of think of it as a collective motive. You know, there are people in there whose only thought is biowarfare, right? They are, you know, they're funded by DARPA, or they are DARPA, or they are high up in the military intelligence, and they're thinking about, you know, is China going to be developing products, but also if other countries are developing, you know, weaponized flu viruses or weaponized Ebola or weaponized coronaviruses, that they want to have a defense against these weaponized coronaviruses. So they want to be the first on the scene with, for example, a vaccine. You know, so when people are working in these high-tech labs, one of the things they do is vaccinate themselves against the viruses that they're working on so that they won't become infected. And the idea is that you roll out these vaccines to your military, for example, and then your soldiers, you hope, are protected against this new bioweapon, whereas the rest of the world is not, right? So there's these whole connections, like there's a whole kind of notion of dual purpose, which is kind of inherent in all this work. And so there's the people who are doing the military part, and then there's a whole bunch of people who are more kind of in the pocket of Gates, if you like, and the World Health Organization, who are basically thinking about how to make a lot of money, how to basically be on the side of all the people who make a lot of money. You know, like if you're a university, you can have patents. If you're a company, you can sell a product. If you're in the procurement of the military, you can be the people who organize the protection for that. So you've got this whole complex of interest, basically. And these conflicts of interest, they the people who want to develop a diagnostic test, for example, for the coronavirus, the people who want to develop a vaccine, the people who want to engineer the virus to be more dangerous, to show that it can really be a potential pandemic pathogen, for example, which is the kind of research that they've done at this Wuhan Institute of Virology and many other places, right? Not only them, but many other places. Those people are thinking about how to get more money out of the government, right? Because there's government money that essentially is oiling all the wheels here. So there's no one thought in this, right? But there's a whole constellation of different thoughts, spanning military all the way to simply making money.
Yeah.
And Bill Gates, the thing about the Gates Foundation is they're kind of like bringing it all together, right? That's their role.
So if you engineer a virus in a lab, what are the potential pathways for it to get out?
Yeah. So the very simple pathway is you go to a cave somewhere in China or in Africa or in Romania or many places where people are collecting bats with coronaviruses, and you basically harvest the animals, or you take samples from their feces or throat swabs or a little wing clipping or something, and you bring that virus back into the lab. But in the process of going to collect that virus, you may become sick, right? So you're out in some fairly remote area, and then you come back to your village at night, or you come back to your city, and you bring the virus with you. So the collector becomes infected. And this, we've seen people who are collectors, not wearing proper protective gear. We've seen people claiming that they got sick, people having, being bitten by bats, for example. You've got all these exposure routes just by simply collecting the virus. And then you've got, the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who are making vaccines, for example. There's a strong theory that the H1N1 swine flu that supposedly originated in Mexico in 2009 actually came from people making a vaccine, right? So the virus that basically gave rise to H1N1 and killed close to 200,000 people probably doesn't match anything that was found in the wild, right? It basically matches a hybrid of viruses of the kind that people would use to make a vaccine. And these vaccines were being given to pigs on farms, right? CAFOs are basically vaccinating their chickens, they're vaccinating their pigs. And so you've got that other route, which is like, basically a heavy duty genetic engineering type scenario in which people have stuck viruses together and then injected them into animals because basically they function as vaccines. And so you've got all those possibilities, and then there's things in between where you basically, somebody brings a virus home from a bat colony, and then they start to work on it. They put it into human cells, or they put it into mice cells, or they put it into a live mice, or they put it into they engineer it a little bit, and then they put it into cells, so maybe monkey cells or rhesus monkeys. So you've got all these different manipulations that happen in these high-tech, quote-unquote high-security labs that are also possible routes for spreading viruses.
Yeah, I think one of the first things I heard about was several years ago, but it was actually in the San Francisco Bay Area, where there was actually a lab worker who thought that they had gotten, I think this maybe was a bacteria, but I'm not sure if it's bacterial or viral, but they thought that they had gotten sick, and they claimed they wanted to get unemployment insurance because they were sick at having gotten sick at work. And the doctor would not okay that without looking at the DNA of the virus. And the corporation that this woman was working for was told that the corporation would not release the DNA because it was proprietary information. So it really made me kind of, what a monster we may be creating here. And if your local lab is, creating new viruses, wow, that could be so, so scary and so crazy. It seems like I used to say that the crop GMOs were the ultimate arrogant act of man, and but now I think I'm shifting to really we're making viruses is like amazing, just amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the same story pertained to the H1N1 swine flu virus, that nobody could get access to any of the information about what companies were making what vaccines to verify whether that was true or not. All that was known was this new novel virus has bits from North America and bits from Europe and bits from South America that have become combined in some way that doesn't look like natural, because those populations are more or less separate from each other. So you've got this hypothesis, but no one can get any further with it. It's the same problem with the Wuhan lab in China, is that there becomes this huge issue of who's going to investigate it now that actually somebody may be blamed for this outbreak.
And then there's the media aspect where, because I think, Mr. Trump actually said something about how he thought maybe the virus was man-made at one point, and of course immediately, everybody on the left immediately kind of went, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, and so I think it landed us all in this very odd place where, actually I mentioned that about what Trump said to one of my friends, and he said, well, even a broken clock is right twice every day. I thought that was a good explanation, maybe. But certainly, do you think that the media is just all in the pocket of this, the drug companies? That is why are we getting such poor reporting, or maybe no reporting even about what's happening here? And
yeah, I mean, for sure, the science media, it's kind of the same. It's the same story as with the mindset behind the creation of this virus and the research that goes on. Is different parts of the media are captured by different people, and sometimes they're fighting it out with each other. The left media appears to be paranoid of so basically just to take a step back a second here, we have had the most tremendous amount of difficulty getting to explaining our theory to the public. Like the article that we've put up explaining where we think the virus came from has been phenomenally popular on the internet, but none of our normal publishing outlets will put it on their websites, right? Because partly for the reason that you say that this is, aren't we just parroting Donald Trump here? And so this is part of what they're thinking. And then you've got other parts of the media, the more conventional parts of the media, which are basically captured by the pharmaceutical industry or are in the pocket of the the military-industrial complex, which has its own agendas here, right? So you've got some really interesting things going on. Some newspapers and some outlets are putting up theories about where the virus came from that are being fed to them by the military-industrial complex and the CIA and all these interesting security agencies. And then you've got other newspapers that are not publishing it because they're too much influenced by the pharmaceutical industry. You know, so like there's all these incredible agendas around this virus, and so we even our friends are not retweeting our information, and so this information is basically being hidden from the public. You know, we've had support from Organic Consumers Association and Ronnie Cummins to like share our information on Facebook and so forth. But basically, you've got all these agendas, and including the agenda, for example, that our theory does not imply that this was an engineered virus, right? That it was basically what we think happened is that the Wuhan Institute of Virology took samples from people who became sick, miners, who were clearing bat poo, who became sick in 2012. They basically took blood samples and tissue samples, and they brought them back to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and then they started working on those. But basically, those samples were basically contained something that looks exactly like SARS-CoV-2. And so basically, the virus evolved in those miners for the 6 months that they were in hospital, then was put into a freezer, and then they took it out of the freezer in 2019 or so, and that was what led to the outbreak, right? You basically have a fully functional humanized virus extracted from those miners that then cause an outbreak. And that thesis...
You don't think that it was then the actual COVID-19 that we're dealing with, you don't think it was actually genetically engineered? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's correct. But there's plenty of food for thought for people who are worried about genetic engineering, because they didn't take that virus out of the test tube in order to admire it, right? They brought it out because they wanted to make an infectious clone, because they wanted to genetically engineer it, because they wanted to sequence it and so forth. But in our estimation, they didn't even get that far, right? What it means is just a virus that you collect from the quote-unquote wild, which in this case is a hospital in Kunming, can be as dangerous as the COVID-19 virus. So like you don't even need the genetic engineering step sometimes. And if they had done the genetic engineering step, if they'd gotten to that stage, it might have been even worse. And that's why we published the most recent article too on our website about the mouse, the researcher, because people are now taking this virus, right, which is a pandemic pathogen, and they're doing genetic engineering on it, and they're putting it into mice, and they're putting it into monkeys, and they're putting it into human cells, and they're doing all kinds of exotic experiments, that will, doubly scary.
Yeah, so, I do, I mean, it's, really what I wanted to talk about too is, just to, get everybody a little bit shocked about what's happening, but, also, maybe explore, what could we do about this? I mean, to me, it's like, these people are jeopardizing, maybe our race, right? And
absolutely.
To me, it's just the pure arrogance that they think that they can create new viruses and then contain them in labs, when even we have quite a bit of history of them getting out. You're mentioning getting bit by a mouse in a lab. I wouldn't have thought of that as a method, but I think in your work, I've heard stories of viruses getting out in the garbage of labs, and there's certainly, I think there's very little regulation happening too, right? So these labs are all hopefully taking it quite serious, but there's no public oversight of that at this point that I'm aware of. So, it leads me to, wondering, like, should should we be filing a class action suit on behalf of humanity against the, well, it would be more than just the U.S. government, right? It would be because it's so widespread what's happening. So any ideas about what we could be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I am really not a lawyer, but I know that, people email me, since we become known for our theory, people have emailed us asking, what is the legal situation here? And of course, I don't really know. But Ronnie Cummins of Organic Consumers, he has mooted this issue, and he would like to do something, I'm pretty sure. So he would be the person to talk to. And but I am, it's such new territory, and there's the history of regulation is really, really weak. There's none of these governments, they're all kind of in the same boat. They're paranoid of what other people are doing, but they don't want to be stopped from doing what they want to do. And so they're all, basically it's an arms control situation and an arms race situation. They are treating this as a military operation, if you like. They're treating it as a biowarfare situation. This is the dual use problem, right? On the one hand, the people who do these experiments always say we're making vaccines, we're making diagnostic tools, and so forth, and we'd all like a better test for the coronavirus at this point, right? But at the same time, the military all see these exact same results as being weapons, defensive and offensive weapons for them. And so the two situations, the medical preventative, in a sense, good side of this, but I would say still a mistaken good side. It's very reductionistic, right? We could go into this as well. This is a very reductionistic model of healthcare that's being pushed, right? And this reductionistic model of healthcare is very profitable, but it is the same, that model is also a military issue for many, many people who are powerful influences. The U.S. government listens more to the military than it does to civilians, right? Basically, in general. And so when the military say they're worried about this, or when the military say they want to have this opportunity to do research without scrutiny, that's likely to be the prevailing paradigm that the government operates. And so we have a problem that we, us and to some extent many other countries, listen more to their militaries than anyone else. And so the legal situation is not going to get, you're not going to get much political support except from the kind of small players. So there's recurring situation of the people, the bad actors are the gorillas in the room at this point.
And, you think there are any lessons here that should be transferred to animal GMOs and crop GMOs, which are still with us?
Well, one great lesson which should be really taken on board is that this kind of research is not protecting us, right? The good part of this research is supposed to be diagnostics, supposed to be vaccines, supposed to be prevention, right? It's supposed to be detecting viruses before they become pandemics. Absolute total washout, right? None of that worked. And the only thing that worked was the dangerous part of it, right? The bits that went wrong that weren't supposed to happen, right? And so this is the story, the take-home message, right? That what's really needed to prevent pandemics is that that we have enough doctors, that we have enough beds, that we have enough ventilators, that we have enough PPE, that we have enough contact tracers. The countries that have successfully forestalled this virus have been socially cohesive countries that also have invested in public health measures of a very generic sort, right? The whole Gates model is that you abandon that kind of healthcare, right? Bill Gates hates that kind of healthcare. He wants everybody to switch to his magic bullet system that makes a large amount of money for large companies. But essentially, what we're seeing in the pandemic is that that model of healthcare doesn't work because they don't have a diagnosis, they don't have a prevention, they don't have a vaccine, they don't have all the things that they expected would come out of their incredibly expensive research, and we may never get those things, right? This is the other interesting thing, that there may never even be a vaccine. It's not that it will be delayed and it's unfortunate and so forth. It may never happen.
Yeah, I've been telling all my friends to eat olive leaf and turkey tail mushrooms, which are both, California is full of them. So, to me, building immunity is, one of the big things we can do. And to me, it's shocking that we don't hear that. Through this whole pandemic, there's been a virtual silence on building immunity and building health, which I think, we all know is so intimately connected with soil health, nutrient density in the foods we're eating, and you certainly don't hear that story.
Yeah, I mean, the people who are becoming the sickest are people with diabetes and poor health habits, right? So this is the other part of prevention, is you have a healthy population that is aging normally as opposed to through strokes and diabetes and Alzheimer's, and then you are much better protected against these illnesses. Many of the correlations that there are between, people are worried, oh, if I'm over 60, I'm at high risk, or if I'm over 70, I'm at high risk. But really, those people, those 50, 60, 70, and 80-year-olds, the reason why there's a higher death rate among those populations is because those people are more likely to have diabetes and heart conditions and obesity, right? It's not really the age. It's the diseases, the modern Western diseases that they carry with them.
Which kind of is a little bit leads us into what your book is about, right? The myth of the master molecule. Or is that your title?
The myth of the master molecule. Yeah. I don't have a publisher yet, but that's what I hope to convince him to call it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to that. And I think we're coming up on our time. Is there anything? Last parting shots you wanted to give us? Excuse the bad pun.
Yeah, well, the very last thing would be to encourage people to share this information. There's a small number of people on the internet who are fighting this battle against the ignorance and stupidity and don't want to know-ness of the science journalists and the scientific community and the media, all those people. And, please share information about the virus and what's going on, and especially people who are investigating the lab origins, or email journalists that and say, look into this shit because this is real.
Yeah, and please, check out Independent Science News on the web, which is Jonathan's, he always publishes his research that he's working on. It's always very, very fascinating stuff.
Thank you